Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you've chosen to join us. And welcome, dear friends. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs virtual service. My name is Betty Lou Cummins, and I'm delighted to be your service associate today. We offer a warm welcome to all who are with us in our virtual reality. Our mission statement and covenant read, "We are a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth and social justice and the arts." And this is our covenant. We strive to look for and to encourage the best in each other as we move toward justice, peace, and love for both ourselves and for the world. And when we fall short, we will seek understanding, reconciliation, and a return to covenant. We welcome all thoughtful people to journey through life's mystery with us. Whatever your religious background or current belief, whatever your race, ethnicity, sexual or gender identity, lifestyle, or circumstances. With us, may you walk the way of holiness and happiness, justice and service. And through your time in our presence, may you feel the blessings of love. As a congregation, we seek to create a diverse and accepting community based on the principles of our faith, Unitarian Universalism, bound together as we are in voluntary loyalty. We believe that we need not think alike to love alike. May we be reminded of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. And now let us come to the silence and this moment with our chalice lighting.
Carry the flame of peace and love forever in your heart. Carry the flame of peace and love forever in your heart. Betty Lou will now give us a story for all ages.
About 200 years ago, lots of people in North America and in Europe were discovering all kinds of wondrous things in the ground. They found coal to burn for fuel, iron for making machinery, nickel for creating tools and candlesticks, and other useful items. They found marl, a gray clay-like substance full of calcium carbonate, garden lime, which made wonderful fertilizer. Those who owned the pits where such items were located counted themselves lucky and hired workers to dig up those resources and bring them to market to sell. Diggers, especially those working in marl pits, found interesting things stuck in the thick gray substance. Bits of seashell, pieces of bone, and gigantic skulls that bore a resemblance to the small lizards that now ran in the fields. When they brought those curiosities home to show their children and neighbors, people were fascinated. It was clear that the marl pits had once been at the bottom of the ocean. They concluded that the skulls and bones must be left over from an ancient flood described in the Bible. The Bible story told of how all creatures, except for those in Noah's Ark, had drowned. Surely such strange bones could only have come from that ancient flood. But there were those who realized that something didn't quite fit with the flood story. They collected specimens and wondered. Let's move forward in time to 1839 in Haddonfield, New Jersey. William Hopkins hired workers to dig up marl in a stream bed in his background. As they dug, they cast aside shells and bits of bone. What was really important was removing the rich gray clay and getting to the market to be sold. And then he encountered something extraordinary in the marl pit. They found a skeleton, complete except for the skull of a giant lizard-like creature, a creature as tall as a house. The workers told Hopkins about their discovery. "Leave it be and dig around it," was his reply. 3 years later, a scientist in England looked at the pieces of bones he had collected from marl pits in his area and came forth with an astonishing theory. He concluded that the bits of bone proved that there were once great lizards, dinosaurs, that roamed the earth. "Impossible! What folly! You have too big an imagination." People all over the world criticized the new idea. According to the Bible, God created all species in the same week about 6,000 years ago. Giant lizards were nowhere mentioned in the Bible, so they must not have existed. The debate raged between those who thought the dinosaurs might have once roamed the earth and those who thought such an idea nonsense. Meanwhile, the skeleton remained in the marl pit in Haddonfield, New Jersey. For 20 years, William Hopkins had a giant lizard skeleton the size of a house in a marl pit in his backyard, and he never gave it a second thought. Until one day when he invited his friend William Folk over for dinner. Folk was a collector of fossils, small bits of bone and shell, and Hopkins wanted very much to impress him. He told the story of the skeleton in the backyard over dinner that night in 1858. Folk wasted no time. He was back the next day to view the find. There it was in the marl pit, proof of the existence of dinosaurs. It was the first nearly complete skeleton to be found anywhere on Earth. Its discovery made news worldwide. Folk arranged for workers to remove the skeleton from the pit and to exhibit the creature, named Hadrosaurus folki, at the Philadelphia Museum of Natural History. The existence of dinosaurs had been proven, and the race to find out more about these mysterious creatures had begun.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Greg Rosasco will now offer us some words of wisdom.
I'm going to take a second for us to consider the words of Fred Rogers from the book, The World According to Mr. Rogers. They're titled Important Things to Remember. And I point this out especially at this time of sorrow for the death of George Floyd, of the facing of the pandemic, the riots, and the economic dislodging that's happened in our country. Mr. Rogers says, "How great it is when we come to know that times of disappointment can be followed by joy, that guilt over falling short of our ideals can be replaced by pride in doing all that we can, and that anger can be channeled into creative achievements and into dreams that we can make come true." May we take a moment of silence before Bonnie plays Spirit of Life.
the music that we have, our special music today, is by Jim Scott, called The Oneness of Everything.
Far beyond the grasp of hands, or light to meet the eye, past the reaches of the mind. There find the key to nature's harmony, in an architecture so entwined. Like the birds whose patterns grace the sky, and carry all who join in love and expanding. The message of peace will rise in flight, taking the weight of the world upon its wings. In the oneness of everything. Still we seek to find the truth, that we might understand and reduce to terms divine. Vast and immeasurable time and space, also overwhelmingly designed. Oh, passing years just might not know the fear that winters in the heart, to be reborn in spring, to hear and to feel the pulse of life enters my soul as a song to sing of the oneness of everything.
The offering for the work and welfare of this church will now be given and received. Please go to our website, uutarpon.org, and click on the donate button, or send your check to 57 Reed Street. The entire address is there on your screen. And thank you. Greg Rosasco will now give us the message for the day about science.
I was asked back in March to speak about the importance of science in the face of the coronavirus pandemic. As I have pondered this issue, 3 questions seem particularly important to me. But before presenting these, let me explain that when I think about science, I think of both the body of scientific knowledge and the women and men who do the research and provide that knowledge to help societies deal with the challenges they face. With that hopefully clear, let me look at the first question that arose for me. That is, how has science provided ample warning of the risks of a global pandemic? To address this, I turn to a recent opinion piece in the New York Times, in which Frank Bruni introduced me to Laurie Garrett, who was described as one of the coronavirus Cassandras. I'll return to this Cassandra label in a bit, but let me quote Bruni, who observes that Ms. Garrett has been warning us, first in her 1994 bestseller, The Coming Plague, and in subsequent books and speeches about a pandemic just like the one we're currently experiencing. The moniker coronavirus Cassandra was coined by David Ewing Duncan in a recent Vanity Fair article with the title, Prepare, Prepare, Prepare. Why didn't the world listen to the coronavirus Cassandras? I'll remind you that Cassandra was the daughter of King Priam of Troy, who had the gift of prophecy and the ironic curse that no one would ever believe her. Both were bestowed by the god Apollo. While Laurie Garrett may be one of the earliest voices in this chorus, Duncan identifies many prominent scientific experts and organizations that have and continue to raise the alarm about the woeful lack of readiness in the US for a pandemic such as COVID-19. Among these are the World Health Organization, our own Department of Health and Human Services, members of FEMA, and the National Security Council. In late March of this year, Christopher Kirchhoff wrote in the magazine Foreign Affairs an article titled, What Washington Failed to Learn from the National Security Council's Ebola Report. Kirchhoff, who led the study and authored the report, notes that Ebola should have catalyzed reform in Washington. He says explicitly, that crisis, the Ebola crisis, and the 2015, 5 years ago, NSC Ebola report exposed gaps in preparedness and capability in every agency in the US government tasked with health and security. Yes, science did its job to forewarn the nation and the world of the likelihood of a global pandemic and how to prepare. The abysmal response here in the United States should be compared to the very different degree of preparation and speed of response demonstrated by countries in the Far East, such as Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, all of which have established parts of the recommended readiness infrastructure and have dealt reasonably successfully with the pandemic. My second question is the following. Is science responding to assist policymakers and the public in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic? While it is a long-standing personal interest to try and stay abreast of the most important developments in research, I would be surprised if most people have not been impressed, as I have been, at the incredible effort across numerous fields of research to address medical, epidemiological, sociological, and economic aspects of this pandemic. Addressing these important questions represents not only a research challenge, but also a major challenge for those on whom we rely to communicate that research to our leadership and to the public. In this regard, I note a discussion from the journal Nature, the premier science journal in the United Kingdom and perhaps the world. The title of this was Coronavirus Conversations, Science Communication During a Pandemic. This is part of a working scientist podcast series about science communication. And this episode asks how well researchers have explained the underlying uncertainties to the public. I was struck by the comments of epidemiologist Sandro Galea, dean of the Boston University School of Public Health. He sees academic researchers as having three roles to generate scholarship and science, to teach that science to students, and to clearly translate it for the general audience. He says, our job is to help the world see how we can bridge the science to a very real, practical decisions that the world has to make to create a healthier world. He adds, we need a new playbook for communicating science in a time of uncertainty and how policy can be informed by uncertain science. We have not done that very well, he says. The professional journalists and reporters are major participants in looking for this new playbook. They have much experience with addressing the question of uncertainty inherent in science. In this podcast, U.S. photojournalist and science writer Tara Hael states, I think journalists and scientists in general have done a reasonably good job of trying to focus on the good information and counter the bad. It is a hard job to do. The entire base of science is uncertainty. It's a quest for knowledge. If you had the knowledge, you would not be seeking it. Now let me emphasize this point. We must do research when there are questions as to the adequacy of our knowledge. Science is in the business of dealing with the uncertainty that impacts our abilities to address an issue. There is an entire issue of the Scientific American published in August of last year, pre-pandemic, with the title, Truth, Lies, and Uncertainty, Searching for Reality in Unreal Times. The second section of the three, titled Lies, includes articles with the titles, How Misinformation Spreads and Why We Trust It, The Contagion of Corruption, and How to Defraud Democracy. The final section, titled Uncertainty, includes looks at the following concerns: how to get better at embracing unknowns. The search for social identity leads to an us versus them mentality, and misinformation has created a new world disorder. I'll use this notion of uncertainty to segue to the last of my three questions. Why is so much confusing information being circulated concerning the pandemic? This remarkably prescient issue of the Scientific American provides much that is relevant to dealing with the recent infodemic, which has emerged alongside the coronavirus pandemic. A few weeks back, NPR reported that 45% of the 200 million tweets about the coronavirus were probably from fake accounts designed to sow in disinformation. Nature magazine recently shed some light on this phenomenon. Let me read from their report. As do epidemics, false information and conspiracy theories have their own super spreader moments. COVID-19 is the perfect storm for the diffusion of false, rumor, and fake news, says data scientist Walter Quattrocchio. People are spending more time at home and are searching online for answers to an uncertain and rapidly changing situation. The topic is polarizing, scary, captivating. And it's really easy for everyone to get information that is consistent with their system of belief. The Nature report suggests that the history of the infodemic started with false claims quietly proliferated among groups predisposed to spread the message. These people are people opposed to vaccines, globalization, or the privacy infringements enabled by technology. The World Health Organization, which coined the term infodemic, describes it as an overabundance of information, some accurate and some not, rendering it difficult to find trustworthy sources of information and reliable guidance. This is an extremely unfortunate and potentially dangerous situation, which is a perfect example of the creation of a new world disorder as suggested in last year's Scientific American. I know that I am biased in favor of science. I am a longtime participant. I understand many of the challenges and know that most scientists dedicate themselves to providing the very best and most reliable information in support of the common good. The Scientific American analysis with the suggestive essay titles above helps me understand where the confusion may come from, reminds me to always look at the source of the information and perhaps their reasons for producing it. This is a vital step to assessing the significance for my own personal decisions, the significance of the information for my own personal decisions, and those coming from various levels of local, state, and national organizations and institutions. I hope you will consider this in your dealing with this difficult time. And I thank you for your attention.
And we'll have our final hymn, This Pretty Planet.
This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, gentle blue giant, spin us around. All through the night, safe till the morning light. This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, gentle blue giant, spin us around. All through the night, safe till the morning light. All through the night, safe till the morning light.
Betty Lou has our closing words, but first, let's extinguish our chalice.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
In closing, we have words, Bring Happiness by Barbara Cheatham. And now we take our leave. Before we gather here again, may each of us bring happiness into another's life. May we each be surprised by the gifts that surround us. May each of us be enlivened by constant curiosity, and may we remain together in spirit till the hour we meet again. Our announcements, we want to thank really so much Greg and Bonnie for helping today with our virtual service. We want to ask you to please check our website calendar for virtual events and meetings, our EU News, and the Quill. And join us, please, on Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock on Zoom for our virtual coffee hour. Have a great day, and we hope you will find us again for next week's virtual mini service. Go in peace.